Right then, so this is Operation Ironclad, May 1942, take 4. Oh, yeah. Before anyone thinks that that's particularly terrible or anything, no, it's not unusual. In the previous one, the landline telephone went off, and my sister decided to have a conversation in the office behind me. I don't know. I am so looking forward to when I have a recording light which I can stick outside my room and go recording. Right then. So, of course, it's me. Now, I have to warn you, I am going to look probably a bit larger than I normally do because I've got my feet up on my bed because I'm being lazy. Enjoy. And today's topic. Make sure it's well clicked. Operation Ironclad. Now, I hope you're going to enjoy this introduction as much as I do. Now, I have to say, when I told some people in my family that I was going to be covering the invasion of Madagascar, they didn't think it was Operation Ironclad. They thought it was this. Now, apart from being now, I'd say, almost a lifelong, or at least since I've seen it, Skipper fan, and really looking out for a Skipper t-shirt, the invasion was always more properly carried out by the Penguins than anything else. Let's be honest. They are the best animated characters by far to have ever appeared. And Skipper is just cool. Right. It's been a fun day. I've got a lot of work to do, but I'm getting through the videos, and I'm going to be prepping for tomorrow's videos. I think probably the introduction videos for tomorrow's is going to be recorded tomorrow, but, you know, I'm not sure. There's going to be at least 3 of them. Might get one done tonight. Now, 5, 4, 3, 2. It's always fun to see how quickly it catches up when I press the N. Right, as I said, it's roughly running at about a 6 1/4 second delay. I'm fairly sure it's about that because I've just posted and checked on YouTube the part 4 of 4 of the Little Ships one, and that seems about right on a 6.25 second delay of voice to video. So we'll hope that's right. So it's 9,000 miles from the UK. It's 1,000 miles long and 300 miles wide. That's nice. And okay, so here's the problem you have with this scenario. This is the trade pre-World War II. And you can see a huge thick belt goes from UK through the Mediterranean, down the Suez Canal, out through the Red Sea, and across to India. It is amazing. It is colossal. It is critical. And the Italians, that forgotten navy, that overlooked navy of World War II, because we always talk about the Germans or the Japanese, when actually the Italians are one of the most balanced and most well-organized forces you're going to fight, block it off. The discourteous curs. Just because we're at war with each other, they're blocking our supply lines going to India. So, that means everything has to go round the Cape. Everything has to go round the Cape. And this means all the supplies going to Russia through Persia, all the supplies going to India for the war in Burma, all the supplies going to Australia from the UK, and from, in large part, from the east coast of the United States, are going round the Cape of Good Hope and going up across the Indian Ocean, which means they're going around Madagascar. So that means Madagascar becomes super critical. It means it is absolutely critical because it is across so many vital supply lines. So, the actual risk of Japanese invasion, the actual likelihood of them actually being able to carry out such an operation is quite low. So people often go, "Why invade Madagascar?" Because despite it being a low chance of actually doing it, if they did carry it out, the amount of damage and issues they could cause is massive. It's absolutely colossal how much damage they could cause. So this means the British have no choice. It also means they have problems with the Free French, because if they tell them in advance, they're worried it's going to leak out. And in the nicest way, one of the reasons they're so worried about it being taken by the Japanese is the French performance in Indochina, where they basically did not nothing, that's a bit cruel, but they weren't really contesting it as well as they might have, and these forces weren't any better supplied. So as far as the British were concerned, they had no faith in the Vichy France defending Madagascar. They had faith in the Free French troops, not in the Free French leader. Well, it wasn't always the best personal relationship. And losing the lovely Madagascar to the Japanese, if the Japanese took it, would be a painful body blow. It would be an absolutely terrible body blow that would have to be dealt with. It would have to be a massive operation. And more importantly, this is taking place in 1942. The British and Americans are building up for Torch. They do not want any distraction from North America. They do not want any distraction from the campaigns already going on in Burma. They don't want any distraction from the campaigns already going on in Southeast Asia. They do not want any distractions from campaigns already going on. If the Japanese took Madagascar, the amount of forces which would be required to take it back and the amount of forces it would cause disruption it would cause would be massive. The amount of issues it would create would be massive. Instead of you having Torch, you might well have to launch an invasion and conquest of Madagascar using those same forces. So instead of you being able to wrap up the war in North Africa and then turn your forces going up to Italy and then the invasion of Europe, you would be having to send those forces around southern Africa to Madagascar. All that equipment, all those landing ship tanks, all those destroyers, carriers, battleships, everything would probably have to go around there, or at least a significant portion of them, which would weaken your attack. So this is what's critical. But also, very quickly, and as it's so beautifully put in this book, the Allies realize, and it's a chapter written by Tim Bembo, the Allies realize that in the nicest way, you don't need to capture the whole of the island. In fact, you really don't need to capture the whole island. What you have to do is you have to take Diego Suarez. The rest can be mopped up later, and it will be mopped up later. But if you control Diego Suarez, you control the vital parts of the island, as if you're, from the perspective of any person taking it. And the phrase is put by Churchill: Portsmouth could be held with the enemy in Caithness, and so Diego Suarez, with hostile forces still in Antiverano and Tamatev, can also be held. And if you can hold Diego Suarez, if you can hold it and its airstrip, you have a massive advantage. By the way, this is Amphibious Assault Maneuver from the Sea, edited by Tristan Lovering, published by the Royal Navy in 2005, and published in 2007 to the wider public by Seafarer Books. It's lovely. It's beautiful. It's got so many operations in. So you don't need to control the whole island. What you need to control is Diego Suarez, and that's what they're planning on. Now, question is, do I wait for 5 seconds and then press the N, or do I press the N while still talking? You know your answer. So, warships. Officially, we have Force H. Now, Force H is pretty much used by, how they do is they deploy an American force to cover Gibraltar and the area Force H normally operates, and Force H goes south. en route to do this, and taking the troops and the supply ships with it. So it's got 2 aircraft carriers assigned to it, Illustrious and Indomitable. Actually, Indomitable comes from the Eastern Fleet, and this is something more to think about. It's got cruisers, Birmingham, Dauntless, Gambia, Hermione, Devonshire, and Jacob van Hilsik. Yes, there is the Dutch along. So, the British are taking the Dutch, but they're not taking the French. They haven't even told the French they're doing this, the Free French. Definitely haven't told the Vichy French they're doing. HMS Manxman, a mine layer. Now, why are you taking a fast mine layer with you? Well, A, she's very fast. But why are you taking a fast mine layer with you for an amphibious operation the other side of the world? Seaplane carrier, HMS Albatross. Monitor, HMS Erebus. Well, the good thing about a monitor is they might have battleship level guns, but they certainly do not have battleship level requirements in terms of drafts, so they can get firing closer. Active, Anthony, Arrow. Anthony's going to be important for the destroyers, but again, some good selection of destroyers. And the Van Galen and the Shirkids. So, more from the Dutch. Corvettes coming along. It's always nice to have the Flower class along. And remember, these are supposed to these are escorts, and they're being used to escort. And just an amphibious assault, not a convoy. It's unsurprising, though, but just don't be surprised at corvettes turning up in more places than just convoys in the Atlantic. Minesweepers, so there's your sloops coming along. And then you have the Eastern Fleet, and I've just emphasized some cruisers, an aircraft carrier they have, and another battleship. So basically, there are three aircraft carriers, and actually there are more battleships, there's some more R-class as well, sitting in the Indian Ocean at this point. Why such a heavy force? Well, you have 2 reasons. One, you're trying to overrule the French. Basically, turn up and go, look, we have brought everything, including HMS Norman. Why would you name a destroyer Norman? Why? I'm sure she was a very good ship, but why? HMS Norman? I presume it's after the Normans, but it's far too close on the name Norman. And you've brought her along, you've brought everything. You're bringing all this force to, first of all, impress the French, and secondly, because of this. The Japanese up in Rangoon. Now, there's already been the Japanese incursion into the Indian Ocean. There's already been issues going on. Somerville is watching them carefully. The thing is, there are 2 options. One, they're wondering, the British are hoping that this preempts any Japanese operation to take Madagascar if they're planning it. But also, they're wondering if they do start taking Madagascar, if they get held up at all, if the Japanese might use that to dash across as a tempting target to wipe out such a large, significant chunk of the Royal Navy that they will dash across the Indian Ocean to mount a strike. These are all potential things that the British... It's the British, because of their, in part, respect for the Japanese, in part, it's the Japanese fear after what they've done, but also, mostly, it's the British thinking, what would they try and do? And a significant chunk of the Royal Navy is away from a major fleet. It's got landing ships, which it has to protect, which have come next to me. A lot of them, they're worried about this. And so they have 3 aircraft carriers not far away. 2 aircraft carriers technically involved, and Formidable and Warspite, the reason I don't think they were far away is because apparently that picture which I showed of the warships, which is of HMS Warspite, and that martlet, is supposed to be taken not far away from Madagascar. And in fact, it turns up a lot in pictures of Operation Ironclad. So that would suggest that Somerville wasn't far away himself, because that was his flagship. Cute. In which case, the whole fleet would have been together. Force H would have been combined with Somerville, and they would have gone fighting. Instead, they had 3 carriers versus whatever the Japanese had scratched together. Landing ships. You have Winchester Castle, Royal Osterman, HMS Kirin, Kirana, and Sobieski. That's the Polish one. Now, these assault transports means that they are basically liners or merchant ships which can carry a lot of troops, but they're also going to be carrying landing craft. That's the important thing. Then your special ships. Derwentdale, which is a converted tanker with a gantry system, which is carrying a lot of landing craft assault, which are the really cool, sort of crucial ones for getting landing craft, well, mechanized, basically. It's basically the big amount of landing craft which are going to get tanks and vehicles ashore, and Bacaror, which is one of the converted LSTs, landing ship tanks. Critical ship for getting tanks ashore. And then you have troop ships. Now, troop ships don't tend to have landing craft fitted on their davits. So that's Orancy, Duchess of Atholl, and Franconia. And then stores and various MT ships, which is Empire, Kingsley, Talata. You have all these ships. They are basically carrying a large amount of supplies. Why? Why are you doing this? Because you're not just sending an invasion force. It's going to be invasion, occupation, and defense force. Okay? It's got to land, take over the harbour and the airstrip and the area around it, and it's then got to be able to secure it in case the Japanese do launch a strike and do come along, and you turn out and you find the Japanese troops are now landing on the same area. You've got to be able to protect your area. This is how important Diego Suarez is. This is how important the whole thing is. Now, the British aren't mucking around. The British are going to take everything with them for this. And they do. They do certainly do. And that's why you have so many ships. They are taking the stuff with them. But it's not just these that they will have with them. They also have significant land forces. And again, the question comes, do I wait or do I press the N? I press the N. Land forces. So, we have the number 5 commando, who are critical giants. They really do a very important part of the operation. 29th Infantry Brigade, who are heavily reinforced, but they're also a fairly crack unit. And they've got B Special Service Squadron with 6 Valentine and 6 Tetrak tanks. That's Royal Marine armors, when the Royal Marines had armor. Machine Gun Company, and then you've got Alpha Brigade's 5th Division, which is also a crack unit. This tells you how important Madagascar was. Okay? In the nicest way, when you've got Torch going on, when you've got the campaigns in North Africa going on, we've got everything you've got going on elsewhere in the world, you would excuse the Brits for sending whatever they could find. You would quite understand the Brits sending the most rawest of raw recruits, a basic brigade or that. They are sending crack troops. The reason they're sending crack troops is A, it's critical they take Madagascar as quickly as possible. B, crack troops are more likely to exercise fire discipline and be able to deal with the scenario with less escalation and more forts. So therefore, they are elite crack troops are going to manage to do the things that they need to do, or at least well-trained and experienced troops are. Without hopefully causing too many casualties on the French, and hopefully no civilian ones. And most importantly, this is a force which, if the Japanese do come, has an actual chance of still holding the island. You basically have a reinforced division being landed. So that's a significant number of troops. Again, the British are working out what the Japanese could deploy. So let's say the Japanese had sent a force to take Madagascar. The British weren't expecting to be a big force, but if the Vichy French back down, and in fact the Vichy French pretty much do retreat into the internal part of the island and don't put up that much resistance, and this is against the Japanese, they might do the same as they did in China. This is what the British are thinking. The British are thinking, well, they might not need to get many troops there to conquer it, and then once they have it, it becomes a big issue. The British therefore think that this force is actually significantly larger than what the Vichy French already have on the island, and is a significant force for holding a much smaller area. Remember, the British aren't going to try and hold the whole island. They aren't even trying to take the whole island at this point. They are just going after Diego Suarez. So they are literally going after a small area and deciding that they can defend it. Admittedly, its major defense is going to be the Eastern Fleet, but, It's like with any land defences of an island or any land defences of any coastline. Your major defence and your best defence is your fleet, keeping the enemy as far away as you can. But if they are going to get close, then, right. So, shall we see how quickly the end catches up? Aircraft. Now, why am I again including HMS Formidable? Because, as I said, there was the fear that the Japanese were going to get involved. And I actually don't think this is a complete list for Formidable. I think there was another fighter squadron aboard her. But, try as I might, I haven't been able to track it down anywhere. I've gone over armoured carriers, I've had a chat with Jamie, I've taken this book apart. And so far, I haven't managed to find it. Now, this could mean in future I have to re-record this video because I could find it, and probably knowing what will happen is I will have a long discussion. I'll put this up and then someone will point it out in the comments and correct me, and then I'll re-record it or add an amendment to a future video. Or alternatively, I will tomorrow, when doing some just casual reading on some book which I randomly pick up, I will find it listed, because this happens to me on a regular basis. But at the moment, I'm more concerned with getting all the references correct on my book. So honestly, I haven't probably put as much time into it as I should. I do apologize. But, so you have HMS Illustrious, which is got the Grana Marcats, Fairy Fulmar, apparently, a single one. Again, a single Fulmar does surprise me, but this backs up my point. The Royal Navy was going with whatever aircraft were available, and were dragging and putting as many as they could, which were working onto their carriers. So you do get Fairy Fulmars showing up. In this case, though, the interesting thing is that the Fairy Fulmar of 882 Squadron is probably getting a lot of support from the Fairy Fulmars in 800 and 806 Squadrons of Indomitable. You've got Sea Hurricanes on 880 Squadron, and I'm tempted to think it was more Sea Hurricanes on Formidable, but again, I'm not sure. But it just Fairy Albacores and a Fairy Swordfish on Albatross is what I think. I might be wrong on the Albatross. And I've put it there as HMAS Albatross, but by this point she's back to being HMS Albatross. But she had spent many years as HMAS Albatross. And the last sort of thing I can find is that she's got Swordfish as her system. So I've left her as HMAS Albatross, and I think it's Swordfish she's carrying, and I think she's got 6 aircraft serviceable and 3 in stores. That's what I think she has. But again, I could be wrong. But also, the Swordfish was the most war-worry of the various float plane types available. So that's why I think she's that. And no, this is quite a significant air group again. This is especially when you consider what they're facing. It's really not that much. So it's a significant force. And along with Erebus, let's be honest, if you have a monitor there and your battleship needs to go off to fight the Japanese because their fleet's suddenly coming across the Indian Ocean to you, you've still got fire support. If your carriers need to go somewhere, well, with HMS Albatross along, launching even Swordfish float planes, especially if they can take some radars up with them, which some of them could, then you still have the option of spotting if the Japanese manage to get round the Royal Navy for the Eastern Fleet and Force H reinforced Eastern Fleet, then they still have a chance of alerting your forces and telling them to get out of Dodge, or alternatively providing observation and fire some sort of air support for the land forces. But the whole thing was designed to be done quickly, and it was designed to be done quickly mostly by Rear Admiral Thomas Drew and Major General Robert Sturgis. Now, here's the interesting thing. Rear Admiral Thomas B. Drew, I cannot find a picture for. I know he retires as a Vice Admiral, and I know he's a very experienced old Admiral, and he helps plan the operation, and then he becomes in charge of the landing forces. And Major General Sturgis is in charge of the ground forces. He's Royal Marines. He's the guy who commanded the invasion of Iceland and occupation of Iceland. So he's really trusted by Winston Churchill. So he's trusted for Madagascar and Operation Ironclad. And Sifrit is the guy basically to come down with Force H as the overall force commander. And again, in any major operation where the Eastern Fleet got combined with Eastern Fleet, he would probably become second in command of that combined force. So he's the naval forces commander. And basically, when I was describing, because of the Falklands War, the amphibious forces command doctrine, where you have the amphibious task group commander up here as the top, and then the amphibious unit commander, and then you have the land unit commander as your sort of task group. And during the operations in the Falklands, Michael Clapp was both amphibious task group and amphibious unit commander, and Julian Thompson was the land unit commander. This is for the actual invasion, San Carlos operation, these sort of things. Well, in terms of Madagascar, you have Rear Admiral Sifrit up here as the group commander. Then you have Drew as the unit commander, and you have Sturgis as the land unit commander. So you actually have that third person in. So you have now 2 naval officers in it. And it works quite well because Drew is involved in the planning and organization and basically goes through the whole way through doing it, and then is in charge of actually implementing it in terms of the ship side. And Sturgis is just a rock. He's a superstar. There is a bit of a debate because these are all army units. These are army land units which are being sent in rather than the Royal Marine Division, these sort of things. But so why are they being sent in under a Royal Marine commander? And well, from what I can understand, basically Winston Churchill is very useful at this point because he goes, I trust him, so he's staying. Now, the whole operation originally starts off being planned under Roger Keyes, under worst case scenario. Then Mountbatten gets involved, but luckily Mountbatten is always at the highest level, and all the paperwork and all the real organization is done by Drew. So he's the unsung hero of this and several other operations which happened in World War II, as one of the people who did the quiet staff work which is necessary to execute these things, and then goes out and actually commands it, which is good because that leaves Sifrit to command the fighting forces, which are providing fire support but also providing cover. And very quickly, early on, they separate the forces off, and the forces are operating very, very much separately. Right. Question again. Do we wait for it to catch up, or do we press the N? We press the N. Right then. So, the operation. Now, here's the joyous thing. That's my copy of the printout because this is the version I printed out for yesterday, and then I've added all sorts of stuff in at the top because I was actually going to wait after, when I hadn't recorded it beforehand, I wanted to add stuff in afterwards because I wanted to talk about it and talk about what came up. It's a shock and awe philosophy, to use the modern phraseology, but it's maneuver from the sea, really. And it's something which has been used a lot throughout history. It's very Corbettian in many respects in its approach, but it's about what having control of the sea allows you. Basically, the level of sea control the British are able to achieve in the Indian Ocean, in the Atlantic, in the vast majority of the world, and especially once the Americans are involved and they have them as allies, but the British and Commonwealth forces have managed to achieve even prior to them, means that they have a lot of strategic freedom in their terms of their areas of operation. And this is what allows them to look at Madagascar and go, the interesting thing about this is they make use of the naval force to cut off the whole area quite quickly. In fact, because Diego Suarez is this sort of little isthmus, really, this little sort of projection at the north of Madagascar, they are able to use the naval forces to very much cut it off. In terms of, there is so much firepower on a constant, and there's a very relatively small, narrow area of advance that the Vichy French could have done, although the Vichy French really don't have the troops to do it. attack takes place across really 2 lines of advance. And this is the interesting thing again. You have a number 5 commando, who will go on to become a key part of 3rd Special Services Brigade in Burma, are doing this sort of northerly route in comparison to the others, in that they're going straight across. They're supposed to find some little boats and make it across and take out a little sort of fort in Antsiran, but they didn't. They got held up. They couldn't find a boat. So, but really that didn't matter, because as well as 29th Independent Infantry Brigade coming along, and they're really sort of blocking off. It's kind of interesting because you have it, the formations are sort of doing a advance, hold, block, advance, block, advance, block, advance, block. We've got battalions all the way across, and we're carrying an attack, but we've left companies and things along to secure our flank and make sure we are watching everything. So this is now our area. We own this now. You do not have a chance. And they do lose troops, and people do die in these operations, so it isn't 100% successful. But it does certainly have a big impact on the speed and pace they were able to achieve. And once they got control of Diego Suarez, they are firmly ensconced. Interesting enough, though, it won't be really 5th Division, which does most of the September operations. And it's tied in again very much to Operation Torch. This whole operation is very much tied to Operation Torch. It's sort of, they want the forces to be able to do other things, so they're doing this to prevent it becoming a problem. And Operation Torch is the critical thing, because if you can win in North Africa, you can then concentrate on Europe. Once you have concentrated on Europe and taken the Italians and the Germans out of the war, you can concentrate on the Japanese, and the Japanese are far more difficult. Now, that's some of the troops going ashore, the Marines going ashore, I think, from a destroyer's motor launch. You know, it's fun times, and that's also, it shows you how the ships are positioning themselves, because you have, in nicest way, the landing craft and landing ships coming in very much more to the south, sheltered in behind Madagascar, and able to make out a break straight towards South Africa if they need to be. The military or the naval warships, they are they are more northerly. They are able to respond and join up the Eastern Fleet. In nicest way, you have landing ships and amphibious ships going in down here with their escort. You have the warships here, and then you have the Eastern Fleet up there. And I'm fairly sure if the plan was quite simple, although it's not enunciated, and I haven't managed to read the National Archives. I go to the National Archives, of course, to check this, but it seems like the obvious conclusion is that if the Japanese had made another sortie into the Indian Ocean while this is going on, then the fleets would have gone, and they would have found themselves facing a far larger force. Again, it's 3 carriers rather than 2, but again, the options are, if Somerville gets a night attack, which is what he'd been planning the first time, with 3 carriers and with that sort of strike force and the radar-controlled fighters that he's able to put together, stands a chance. But doesn't mean the Japanese are off doing other things, and this gets to go fairly well. Anyway, that's the introduction to Operation Ironclad. Hope you enjoyed. Please note that when I talk about Operation Ironclad, I'm just considering it the initial landings. I'm not considering it the stuff which takes place in September and November till the Vichy French finally surrender. Thank you very much to all my subscribers. Thank you very much to everyone who watched this video. Thank you to everyone who's pre-ordering my book, Tribals, Battles and Darings, the Genesis of the Modern General Purpose Destroyer. Or Modern Destroyer. It's one of the two. And thank you to everyone who's a patron. Seriously, thank you to the patrons, because some very cool books have arrived with this month's patron fund. This one has just arrived today. Well, it's just come out of watch today. Sloops by Arnold Haig, and I haven't had much of a chance to read it, but it is cute. future work on sloops, definitely. And So the Battle by Basil Jones, which I've already discussed. Plus the new books on small ships, which has affected the little ships videos. Thank you very much to everyone, and